Hey magicians, today we're going to be doing something that I've been wanting to do for a really long time. This is going to be my very first Breyer Etchie. I've never done this before, I have no idea how it's going to turn out, but I'm really excited. So I have this mare here, she's a dark palomino, kind of a dark honey color, but I have another horse that looks almost exactly like her and I have trouble telling them apart sometimes. So I thought, okay, I want to make them a little different, but I like the way her coat is shaded. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scrape the paint off in patches and make her a Pinto, because I really like Pintos. I think they're cute. So that's what we're going to do. In terms of materials, you really don't need that much. You need, of course, the horse, and you need a pencil to mark out where you're going to scrape beforehand. And I've got also an X-Acto knife here and a razor blade, and please be careful when you use these. They are super sharp. Both of these items are very, very sharp, and you can give your sieve a nasty cut. So please be careful, and not recommended for little people. If you're little and you want to do an etchie, either wait or use sandpaper, and that's what I'm going to be using a little bit here just to smooth. It's super fine grit so that it doesn't leave grooves. And please, again, be careful with sharp things. So first step is, of course, to mark out where you want to scrape, and I noticed that there's a scratch on her nose right here, so we might as well just put white there so that you can't see it anymore. And anywhere else there's a flaw in the paint, that's perfect for making an etchie. See, there's a mark here on her butt, and more scratches on her flanks and on her shoulder. So we can put white markings there and cover them up so she looks neat again. So we're going to take this pencil and we're going to just carefully mark out the edges of the markings so that we can see where we want to scrape. And I want her to be mostly brown, so the white markings aren't going to be that pervasive. And we're just going to very carefully mark, and the pencil should show up just fine on the paint. She's going to have a big white splotch here on her rump. If you make a mistake, don't use the eraser, because this plastic is weird and you'll just end up smudging the pencil everywhere. Just use your finger and rub it off, and it should come off just fine because the plastic is so slippery, and then you can just draw until you like it. Okay, so I have marked out all these markings. She has some spots on her shoulders, on her sides. I've got one that goes underneath her belly, and on her other sides I've got some smaller ones next to the big spot on her rump. I've got small ones on her neck, and then I've marked out a big blaze down the front of her face. It's going to cover the entire front and go down to the muzzle to cover these scratches. Also, I've noticed that a lot of the horses nowadays that you get from Breyer, instead of having clean separation between the color on the leg and a white marking on the foot, there's kind of a fade. I understand it's easier to do with an airbrush, but it doesn't look as nice. So I'm going to be neatening up the edges here, and in the case of this particular leg, I'm extending it up above the knee. The other ones I'm just going to be scraping off a little bit of the paint so that the edge is cleaner. And then I also have extended the mark on her rump to cover the paint discoloration here and the scratch here. So I think we're ready to start etching. And etching is a very time-consuming process, so if you get bored, just put it down and come back. It's not an emergency that needs to be finished immediately. And just take your time and try to do a good job, because if you rush and you mess up, you're going to regret it way more than if you take longer than you wanted to, but it comes out really nice. So we're going to start on her rump, and I have my X-Acto knife here. We're going to see how this works. And we're just going to start scraping off the paint really carefully. You don't want to dig too deep or you'll gouge the plastic, and then you'll have to do a bunch of sanding. And it's actually coming off pretty easily, which is nice. We're just going to scrape. And this knife is a little bit dull because I've used it for other projects. So it might be better for small areas since it has a tip. We're going to try the razor blade now and see if that works any better. It's a little flexible, so it might curve better to the rump. Yeah, that seems to be working better. I guess we'll just use this. And for the large white markings, it's best just to kind of gently scrape with the flat of the blade angled toward the part you're scraping. That way you won't actually gouge it with a corner and make a funny bump. And then occasionally you should just brush off the flaking paint with your finger so it doesn't get in your way. Just carefully keep scraping. It's going to take a while. You may also want to get the edge of the blade under the edge of the paint so that you can take off a bigger flake. That generally works better, I've heard, on larger models because the paint is thicker. Here on the Stablemates, it's just like basically a single layer of airbrushed paint. so it takes some delicacy to get off. But if we just keep going, there we go, it'll come. And I'm starting out in the middle of the marking so that I get used to it. I'm not going to go toward the edges until I'm really confident with the scraping technique. I've never really done this before, so I feel like it's going to take some practice. But once I get the hang of it, I'll be able to get some nice clean lines in there. Might want to use the X-Acto knife for that. Okay, so it did actually take a while, but I've successfully finished scraping off the marking on her rump, and it looks pretty good. I think it may have come out a little bigger than I expected, but it still looks alright, especially from this side. I like the way that the shape came out on this side. So it is indeed a very time-consuming process, but it's definitely rewarding. I've got a long way to go. I guess the next marking I'm going to do is the one that goes on the bottom of her belly, so I'm going to start scraping on that. So I've managed to get this belly marking etched out, and it was pretty difficult because I had to navigate in between her legs here, and also there was a stamp, the Breyer stamp on her stomach that I had to scrape off in order to get all the paint off. So it took a while, but I've got it, and she's looking better already. So I'm just going to keep going with the markings on her legs and her shoulders, and we're going to see how she looks. Here she is. I finished all the etching, and it did take forever. In fact, I had to stop filming because it got dark. Finished her overnight, and now it's Sunday. Started on Saturday, finished on Sunday. I'm done etching. She looks great. Actually, I'm really pleased with how she came out. There are some feathery edges on her markings and some places where I couldn't get the razor to behave on the surface of the paint, but I actually think it makes it look more real, because on a real horse, the edges of the markings are definitely not perfect. So I think I could probably get away with that. I like how the blaze turned out. And so she's done etching, and now I'm thinking she needs some paint, because I'm looking and there's a little bit of a scratch on her eye there. And also there's some scratches on her lower legs, and I should probably put some pinking on her muzzle. So we're going to do a little bit, like a miniature retouch, just to make her look a little nicer. Alright, so I've picked out white, black, pink, brown, and yellow paint. I've got a piece of cardboard to mix on, tiny little paintbrush, I've got some water in this giant plastic thing, and I've got some paper towels to clean up, and that's all you really need for a paint job. Here's the horse, and first we're going to do the pinking on her muzzle. So I'm going to mix some pink with some white to make a light pink, and then I'm going to put some water in it so it goes on easy. Alrighty, so I've got my watered down pink paint right here. I've got some on my brush, and now I'm just very carefully going to dab some onto her nose, just at the very tip. Because when a horse has a white marking on its nose, you can generally see the pink skin showing through. And I'm gonna, since there's a lot of it there, I'm just gonna very carefully dab some of it off. And it of course it pools in her nostrils, so we have to be careful about that as well. I've done the pinking. It looks good. It also helped cover up some of the scratches that were on her muzzle from the etching. And now if we turn her around, you'll see that when I retouched the markings on her legs, there's still a bit of a feathery edge. So I'm going to mix a bit of a dark brown and neaten that up. Thing that we're going to do is touch up this little scratch on her eye. It might actually be a bit of white paint peeking through, I'm not sure. I'm just gonna dab some black on it, and we should be good to go. Yep, alright, she looks good. Here she is. I'm really happy with how she turned out. The etching took a very long time, as I expected it would. But I think it was definitely worth it, because now she's a very pretty Pinto. I think she's adorable. I really like how her face turned out. And I would definitely recommend this method to anyone who has two horses that look kind of the same and wants them to look different. I would definitely recommend etching because it's very easy. Even if it does take a little while, it's very easy to do. It doesn't require a lot of fancy materials, and the outcome is generally, I think it's pretty cool. So, very happy with this project. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the comments.